Folks, I feel like sand sometimes gets a bad rap in the hobby, and I feel like there are a lot of misconceptions about using sand in a planted aquarium. So in a two-part video series, I'm going to address using sand in a planted aquarium, sifting through the good, the bad, and what to know coming up right now. There are a lot of great aquarium substrates out on the market, and sand is one of them. Now, this is all to taste. Some people like sand, some people don't like sand, but I've been reading on forums lately and seen comments and videos, people saying, well, you shouldn't use sand in a planted aquarium, you can't grow plants in sand, and I don't want that to be discouraging, especially to beginning to intermediate hobbyists that like the look of sand and want to give it a try. So I decided to do a two-part video series on using sand in the planted tank. In part one, we're going to talk about what type of sand to use and not to use, misconceptions about sand and advantages of using sand, and in part two, we'll talk about disadvantages and what to know if you use it. Now, what type of sand to use? In this video, when I say sand, I'm primarily referring to these types. Aquarium sands like Estes, Stony River, one of the best options and most premium aquarium sands in the market. Oxygen passes all the way through the sand bed and the grains are perfect size. Same with Carib Sea Supernaturals, a good option. Then of course you have pool filter sand, silica-based sand, very cost effective, and black diamond blasting sand. Sand not to use in a planted tank, play sand. This is too tightly packed, the roots won't spread. More importantly, it will build up pockets of anoxic bacteria and give off hydrogen sulfide, which is toxic to our fish. The other is Tahitian moonlight sand. This should be off the market by now. It was rumored to have killed fish. It had sharp edges and included toxic metals, so if you do see that, stay away from that. Let's talk about some misconceptions that seem to be out there about sand. Number one, you can't grow plants in sand. Well, folks, this is simply not true. Now, sand might not be as optimal as dirt or aqua soil, and you're going to have to use root tabs and fertilize, but you can have success using sand in a planted tank. This is my crib fry grow out tank. You can see the plant growth after 8 months, and this is simply using pool filter sand. I use the same thing in my 10-gallon tank. This is the original build in February 2016. Here's what it looks like today. For those that follow the channel, this is also referred to as Patriot's tank. He has a new hobby, chasing celestial pearl danios around. Number two, the silica in sand causes constant algae outbreaks. Well, folks, you are going to get an initial brown diatom algae outbreak in a newly set up tank from the silica leaching out of the sand. But after 7 to 14 days, this goes away. It doesn't cause constant algae outbreaks. This is no different than using any other substrate with a newly set up tank. The only difference is you might have a little bit more brown algae because there is silica in the sand, but that's nothing that some nearite snails and ottos can't cure. But once it's gone, it's gone. And in both of these tanks, I've never had another brown algae outbreak except when they were newly set up tanks. Number three, gravel is better than sand. Well, that's to taste. Some people like gravel, some people like sand, but if you like sand, don't let that deter you. Gravel does have a downside. It's great, but there are wider gaps in it that allow debris and mulm to get trapped. It can break down and rot, increasing nitrates and phosphates and lower water quality, and in a planted tank, it's a lot harder to gravel vac down into the bed. So it's not necessarily always a better choice. Number four, sand will create pockets of toxic gas. Well, this really depends on the type of sand used. Play sand certainly has this potential, but if you use sands designed for the aquarium, the grains are large enough for oxygen to get through the entire sand bed. These are sands like Stony River or Carib Sea Supernaturals. Now, even if you use cheaper sands like pool filter sand or black diamond blasting sand, they may not be designed for the aquarium, but the grains are large enough that the risk of toxic gas building up is fairly low. Now, there are things that you can do if you're using the cheaper sands. One of those is you can hire an army of Malaysian trumpet snails. They're great at burrowing down into the sand and sifting through it to help prevent any gases from building up. Now, I do have these guys. I love them for my tanks, but personally, I've never had an issue with any kind of gas buildup using pool filter sand. Number five, sand gets into the filters. Well, this is easily solved by putting a filter sponge over the filter inlet. Now, you can also keep your filter inlet a little bit more off the ground, maybe 2 or 3 inches or at the midway point between the sand and the top of the water column. And by doing this with a filter intake sponge, you shouldn't have any sand getting into the filters. Number six, roots can't grow in sand. Well, maybe not in play sand, but in pool filter sand or aquarium sands. You can see the root there on the Amazon sword. They burrow just fine. Advantages of using sand. Well, one, it's cost effective. This entire bag of pool filter sand cost me $13. Black Diamond blasting sand is also very cheap, but even if you want to go with the more premium sands like Estes Marine or Stony River sand, it's still a pretty good deal. This 5-pound bag of Stony River on Amazon costs $13.56. Of course, there are a lot of other retailers out there. It's about on par with other aquarium substrates. But Carib Sea Supernaturals, you can get a 20-pound bag for $15.99. That is a pretty darn good deal. Number 2, sand doesn't alter water chemistry. Now, personally, I've never had a problem with pool filter sand altering any of my water chemistry, and premium sands like Stony River use a ceramic coating around the sand grain so nothing leaches out. This can make it especially easy for beginners to work with because they won't have to worry about any changes in water chemistry that they might have to deal with. I alluded to this earlier in the video, but sand is cleaner than gravel. Gravel has wider gaps, mulm and debris can get trapped in those gaps and rot, increasing nitrates and phosphates and lowering water quality. And it's a lot harder to gravel vac all the way down the gravel bed in a planted tank. With sand, debris collects on the top, easier, swept over to the filters, and simply easier to vacuum right on the top of the sand bed. Number 4, sand is a part of the natural environment that's native to many of the fish that we keep in the hobby. It's easy for them to sift through, to rearrange, to create territories, to create caves, and to burrow into. It's especially nice if you have corridors or fish with barbels because the sand won't wear them down. Now here's a little example I caught the other day. This is my crib fry grow out tank. A male and female did pair up, and you see a huge pile of sand that used to be under the driftwood. They sifted through that and removed it and essentially created a little 2-bedroom house for themselves under that driftwood, and the sand made that very easy for them to do. In part 2, we're going to talk about some disadvantages of using sand, because there are some, and we're going to cover some tips if you decide to use sand in a planted tank. So folks, I hope that video is helpful. If you like the look of sand and you want to use it, don't be discouraged. Go ahead and give it a try because it is a pretty darn good substrate for a planted tank. Please like, comment, and subscribe for future content, and as always, thanks for watching.